Hello and welcome to this content episode and to the FUT Weekly podcast, out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, and made possible by the pod's patron supporters. Let's get into it then. We're going to talk about chemistry today, and I think we've had enough time with it to give some early-ish thoughts, and we have two content experts to really break it down for us, which is going to be good. And as we very often do, almost always, we have 𝘵𝘃𝗱𝗯𝘀. Welcome back to the pod.
Thank you very much, Ben. Though a semi-content expert myself, maybe. Not so much. I look at what I like and what I don't like, and that's kind of the end of it.
Yeah. I think the eyes just light up a little more for the gameplay pod, you know?
What are you going to do with the cards if you can't play with them?
Yeah, exactly. Forgotten by many FUT players, I think, unfortunately, but not our next two guests who like both the gameplay and content side of FIFA 23. We'll start with Jason, aka Kimpembro. I guess, Kimpembe, not quite the force he was last cycle.
Yeah, I'm changing my name to 𝘬𝘯𝘁𝘬𝘦, I think. I think he's so clear now. So Jason works fine. Thank you for having me back, actually. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you back. First time in FIFA 23. So that's great. And we also have with us Josh, aka SpreadsheetFIFA, joining us again for a second time in FIFA 23. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Shout out Papa Spreadsheet. He listened to the first episode and asked me lots of questions about Ultimate Team that he'd never asked before. So shout out to him if he's listening to this one.
Always good to hear listeners finding guests outside of the pod, and we should get into what we're going to talk about first. Always pound for pound Powerhouse on the content pod, which is the best value player over the past week or so. I actually realised I didn't put out the poll for the pound for pound for last week, which was silly, but that means the guests on the podcast can decide the winner. We had the SBC Jack Harrison nominated, Rulebreakers Godfrey, Rulebreakers 𝘂𝘂𝘀𝘀 or Robert1, and Inform Musiala. No giveaways from James as to which one was his. So who would you say should win last week, Josh?
It's a tough one. I think I'd swing towards Rulebreakers Godfrey, just because I feel like he's been the most overlooked. And if you look at his price compared to something like Inform Joe Gomez, without going down the Everton versus Liverpool route, he, with an architect, is the only way to get him lengthy, but he's a brilliant centre-back for under 50k in the Premier League. That is English. I don't understand his price at all compared to some of the others.
And then, Jason, are you going to rubber stamp that, or have you got another one you want to go for?
I'm going to go with Rulebreakers 𝘂𝘂𝘁𝘂𝘁, mainly because I've actually used him quite a bit, and he's surprisingly brilliant. Like, he would have been my pound for pound. If I was on last week, he's exactly who I'd have went pound for pound, Powerhouse. The only thing that lets him down a little bit is like the work rates if you want to play him a bit more defensive, but he's such a good, like, all-rounded midfielder. His agility on the ball. I mean, I used him for quite a lot, and he was surprisingly very, very good. So he would be my pick.
Nice. And then
so we don't match.
yeah. I was going to say that now we have to have someone decide it, which is good because neither of those were 𝘵𝘃𝗱𝗯𝘀. So I can ask 𝘵𝘃𝗱𝗯𝘀 to decide between Rulebreakers Godfrey and 𝘂𝘂𝘁𝘂𝘁. Who are you going to go for to win last week?
I mean, this answer is easy because I just want to say Robert1 again. Godfrey is such an easy name. It's like not that fun. So Robert1 it is.
Yeah, and I guess, Jason, you used him, so that's probably a bit fairer too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, impending Robert2 lookout world. I see myself out. All right.
Nice. Well, we should move on to this week's Pound for Pound Powerhouse nominations, and we'll start with a listener suggestion. I especially want to get this one in there because I think people are going to go for it. 𝘵𝘃𝗱𝗯𝘀 went for pound for pound being Thomas Meunier, the Rulebreakers 4-star weak foot, base positions of right back, right wing back, and a right mid. High attacking, medium defensive, 6'3" and great in the air. He's a lengthy boy at standard, but with anchor, his strength is 95, heading to 93, sprint speed to 99, and acceleration to 85. I'm playing him as a marauding right back in a 4-1-2-1-2, and in his first 10 games saw him chip in with a double-digit goal involvement, winning every long ball on counter defensively. For 14k, he's a no-brainer, and I've got my fingers crossed for a Bellingham promo card. Yeah, I used him myself over the weekend, and he is outstanding, was going to be my nomination too. Really impressive, just kind of flawless, to be honest. I mean, yeah, he's not the most dribbly player because he is big, and just because a player is fast with lengthy or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean they're the most agile, but he moves well and seems to be very composed. So was quite impressed. Definite good nomination to start us off. So who should we go for first? Well, actually, I guess Jason Kimpembro, you've been on the podcast the least recently, so we'll come to you first. Who would you like to nominate?
I'm going to steer clear of SBC players. Otherwise, I probably would be edging towards 𝘵𝘚𝘬𝘦, believe it or not. But I used 𝘵𝘰𝗬𝘀𝘚 Avila. I used him this weekend in my weekend league team because I'm running quite like a budget-ish weekend league team just on my main whilst I'm trying to like save some coins and that sort of stuff. But again, like he's literally discard for obviously 5-star week for and if you would have used his card last year, what was it? It was I don't know. I think it was another FUT fantasy style card.
It was FUT birthday, wasn't it? Yeah,
FUT birthday. Yeah,
tokens. Yeah,
yeah. He for this weekend. I played him up top with Falcao, and he was surprisingly very good for a card that is just genuinely discard. I mean, his finishing was very good. Not got the greatest agility, but or skills. But I think once you get a player that you kind of know their strengths and their weaknesses, he is controlled. He's not part of the lengthy meta, but I mean, he's well worth a try for someone who you can kind of shift the ball onto both feet and just shoot with. And I found his finishing to be like surprisingly very reliable. So that's going to be my choice.
Nice, I like it. And then we can move on to Josh. Who would you go for yourself this week?
I'm going to go for the objective De Jong. Luke De Jong with 2 U's. He is a 93 rated striker with a marksman, which is probably what I would give him because he does need a little bit of help in the dribbling department. And with 90 sprint speed as base, you kind of, obviously he's lengthy, but he gets up to speed incredibly quickly. And with the link to the Player of the Month 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘐 that's still available for 11 days, and for what is essentially a free card that you only need to spend your time getting, he is unbelievable. I used him this weekend in Weekend League, and oh man, like he is 6'2", but he feels 6'4" or 5 on the pitch, and his 5-star weak foot in the box is absolutely deadly. It's very easy to get his shooting into the mid-90s in all the important stats. He is incredibly strong. I just in terms of a fun player that is free that you can put into a team and get easy links to, he is so good.
Yeah, he was actually nominated by a listener as well. So a shout out to 𝘵𝘠𝘬𝘀𝘬𝘀 who also went for him and agreed. I think he's the type of player that is nice to see is definitely more effective this cycle. So yeah, on to you, Japes. Probably not much left at this point, but anything you wanted to go for?
I mean, I'm going to take 𝘵𝘚𝘀𝘀 Merino, the rule breaker. I don't know how we're not, like, he's not getting snapped up. When you look at quote unquote like similar cards that you might see, you're looking at like icon level stats almost across the board for him, and you're getting him for 60k. So it's a no-brainer. He's also I guess a lengthy boy as we're saying it. I can't remember what the one to compare, the 𝘵esse SBC was like 110k, right? He's got arguably better stats than 𝘵esse does.
Yep,
all the way across.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really good option.
And the link to Aldi Haaland as well. He's got that club link to Sorlot.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, he does.
Japes' favourite player, Sorlot. Actually, that's probably been one of the most controversial takes of the last year. Japes last week going in on Sorlot. People weren't happy.
All right, so are there sore loser? Man, I'm feeling major dad energy today.
That's almost as bad as pound for pound smile houses.
Yeah, exactly. I was like rolling my eyes at that as I had my wife editing my issue. She was like, "Oh gosh, are you going to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah."
And of course, your newsletter to find out more about what we're talking about. We should do that little plug.
Yeah.
So I think, it leaves me with probably what is the most obvious choice. And you kind of feel like, can you count this as one SBC and go for 2 players in one with the dynamic duos?
I mean, that's the ultimate like cheater host of the show.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I make the rules sort of thing. Yeah. But I guess it'd be someone could probably do it in future. But yeah, 𝘵𝘚𝘀𝘀𝘀 and Poch. I don't know how you pronounce Stefan Poch. But yeah, they're both really, really good value. I mean, it's what, like 15k? They're both 83 rated squads for each. And 𝘵𝘚𝘀𝘀𝘀, I feel like he's probably the more interesting player. Obviously, he's got 4-star skills. He's definitely lengthy and 89 strength, 74 agility. has, solid dribbling stats, especially for his size at 6'4", but really good base passing, which I think is quite underrated in terms of what it means you can then do with chemistry styles. His shooting stats also really good, and I think well set up for something like a hunter on him to get a bit more pace if you're happy with the dribbling. Looks really good. So you can't really boost his dribbling, or you can't really boost his agility, otherwise you lose the lengthy if that's important. Although, yeah, as we were talking about last week, I think control is kind of underrated anyway, to be honest. So if you do want more dribbling out of him, I think you can do that without upsetting his pace too much. But Posh is also pretty good, although he's kind of lacking on the ball. I don't know if anyone here has used him, but I was a little bit concerned by the 42 dribbling and the 61 ball control, but his reactions and composure are very good, and passing is good too, so he's probably going to get away with it. He's also got medium work rates. I think he's just not quite as exciting as on 𝘵𝘵𝘃, but with 83 base pace, lengthy default, I think he's still going to be really good. So I don't know. I'll sneak in the double dynamic duo. It's rare I get a win coming last, so I'll do it. But has anyone got any further comments on them? Because I think, yeah, as a lot of people have said, they're pretty good.
With 𝘵𝘃𝘀𝘀, you missed out the fact he's got outside the foot shot trait, and this FIFA that is just a game breaking for me. Anytime I have a player who uses it, they just feel like their shots outside the foot are just broken. So yeah. that's what interests me about 𝘵𝘃𝘀𝘀.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very good point. And Josh, anything to add before we move on from the dynamic duo?
I just think the dynamic duos have been brilliant so far. I think they've been really, really well priced. Good enough cards that you can add them to your team. They're probably not going to get into your team if you're looking for those higher ranks. But in terms of fun cards, and it's nice that we've got our customary fun 𝘵𝘃𝘀𝘀 card early this year. Usually he gets an inform or what was it last year? Was it a Rulebreakers as well? Or obviously this isn't a Rulebreakers, but I think it was a Rulebreakers last year. He had a really fun card that I used for a few weeks up there. I would steer clear of Posh. Everything about his card says he will be able to win the ball back, but you're going to lose it immediately. 43 vision and 42 dribbling that would be terrible on a bronze card. So,
yeah.
but yeah, that Ārni looks really fun, and the Austrian link to that 𝘵ci 𝗵𝘃𝘀𝘀 if you did it as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, there are a couple of good Austrian players, but it's nice to see a club like Bologna get a couple of special items, because with the way chemistry works, that is perhaps going to be a little bit more tricky. And that actually leads us nicely onto what I think we can talk about next, which Matt was basically asking what we thought, having had enough time with the chemistry system, of the chemistry system. How are we feeling about it? Do we think it's positive? I've got a couple of listener takes, which I can also read out, but let's go around. I think, Japes, maybe start us off, because you've kind of set your case out before, saying that you felt that it's still a positive addition and you'd liked it. Any more detail apart from that?
I think at the beginning of the game, which is where we still are, chemistry is obviously going to matter, and people are going to care a ton about it. And I think that remains to be, or it still holds true, right? The cards aren't high enough rated that where a +8 or in some cases a +15 boost can't be super meaty. So I think that's true. But I find as I'm getting higher and higher rated cards in my team, I increasingly am caring less and less about chemistry. I am still going to call this a net positive, but you're not going to feel how positive this is for another month or two at least. Like in like maybe another month, I would say. Like when the World Cup hits, I think it'll be fine. I think they miss the mark on some things. Like icon chemistry is goofy. It doesn't feel good having icons in your team. And I did the 85 𝘵ci and got Baby Blanc, which would be considered like really a great good result. Yeah, but he has made it like, because he's only an attacking mid or a center back, and I happen to have packed a lot of untradeable like attacking mids that I try to get into my team. It's forced me into some like awkward situations to like get him in, and he is a card that is great with chemistry boosts. So like he feels a little clunky without the boosts. There are cases where it feels bad. So I'm sympathetic with that. Icons being kind of like the top end of where it ends up feeling bad. I think being able to change positions with players with just one card is amazing, and being able to put them into like a left mid to an attacking mid to a striker, or whatever you want to do for players where they actually might play on the pitch is super cool. I would have liked to have seen them change that some with like rule breakers and say, this guy can play, I don't know, a variety of different positions. But my concern would be that the game's coded in a certain way to not allow that. I think net, it's probably a positive. It does offer some awkward restraints, though, around like how you set up your starting formation to get players in a different way, though, than previously. So down the road, I think it's still going to be viewed as a net positive. Right now, it still just feels uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, and actually just feeding off that point on 𝘂𝘀, I had a kind of different but similar issue in some ways with my icon. Got 𝘬𝘯𝘬𝘦, who I was pretty happy with because he's one of the more usable players. Yeah, like a really good player. But he absolutely destroyed my chem because he doesn't provide anything to anyone on the pitch. Whereas previously,
it's 𝘵𝘃𝗃.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 𝘵𝘃, yeah. Previously, I was having a lot of chemistry provided by Dembele, who I'd bought and was playing right mid. So it wrecked my chem. I still wanted to play Son on the left. Son can only play on the left. So the only place I could play 𝘬𝘯𝘬𝘦 was on the right. Lucky he has that right mid switch because otherwise it would have been really annoying. Just ended up basically making sacrifices elsewhere. But I guess the thing you have to think about is ultimately we were always making sacrifices. You just didn't really register them so much because it was so natural when you were building teams. I think even in the old system, there were sacrifices to be made. But I think when I look at other people's teams, people are clearly going 1 or 2 league. Rarely 2 league, really. Maybe they'll have a couple of players from other leagues, but like it's 1 other league or 1 other nation. So it does feel like slightly restricted in that sense, which is disappointing. But I don't know. I think for me, icons is the biggest miss in terms of chemistry. And I think actually, if we had, say, icons provide 1 player to every league in the game, and I think we talked about this before, then I think actually that would probably make quite a big difference because then people are like, right, here's my kind of get out of jail free card for chemistry, and I could really bump up my chem overall with this player, and that will allow a bit more flexibility and allow me to add more leagues, which maybe apart from heroes you don't really have at the moment, and even they don't provide a huge boost. But yeah, interested to hear from Jason and Josh. Josh, first of all, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I kind of agree. Shout out to the 𝘵𝘃𝗃𝗀𝘀 on Twitter. He put something in the other day, which is that all the icons have the information of every team they've played for in their career. Well, if that's already in the game, why don't they just give an extra boost to all of those clubs and then give a boost to the league for all of the leagues that they've played in as well, and fully lean into an icon being the linking player? It almost feels as if, because of the flexibility EA have with heroes that we saw last year, they kind of want to move more towards heroes and slowly phase out icons, because it's clear that icons are bad for chemistry. Like there's no situation really in which introducing an icon is going to improve your chemistry. I will, in terms of a wider point of the new chemistry system, I do like that both icons and heroes get full chemistry regardless of who else is in the team. That is a big positive. Obviously, that was already the case for icons as long as they were in the right position last year. But I do think for people like 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀 or 𝘵𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀, you're seeing their price is incredible compared to last year because you could just get them on full chemistry. It doesn't really matter. I kind of feel like the 𝘵𝘦𝘦 meta has made chemistry more important than it was before we really cared about 𝘵𝘦𝘦. And if you still don't, it doesn't have as much of an effect, because a lot of players need the architect chem style, for example, to get to 𝘵𝘦𝘦 or to get to controlled. And they need to be on 3 chemistry in order for that to have the maximum effect to break that threshold. And so I found people seem to be wanting to get players onto 3 chemistry a lot more for that reason than necessarily for any of the other boosts that they're getting. And then what my kind of final musings on how the chemistry system has changed the way at least I've played the game this year is my team has changed drastically. Like 3 or 4 times a week, I will be introducing 4 or 5 players back into a lineup in order to kind of change from a Serie A La Liga hybrid into a La Liga Premier League hybrid. And it kind of is dictated by who I've packed. But I agree with Japes, that as the cycle continues, especially when you start getting, team of the year, for example, if you pack a team of the year and it doesn't fit your team, it doesn't matter. You just put them in on base stats. It's not going to make any difference. And although I said that was my last point, it wasn't. My actual last point is I don't like that substitutes, the chemistry style that you've got on a substitute makes no difference whatsoever. That seems silly to me. I think they should have one or two chem coming off the bench regardless, just so that, if you give an Anchor or a Shadow, if you paid a lot of coins to get one of those chemistry styles, I want to still be able to change a player coming off the bench. That feels a little bit silly that I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. I would actually just, something I did want to mention myself, and you've reminded me, that thing about changing more of your team more often is actually something that potentially, the content team, you might think of as a positive potentially, because people are going to care more about the depth of their club than they would have previously. And actually, I don't mind that. I think having to think about more players than just your starting 11, and obviously now like 5 bench players, I guess even 6 bench players, is quite good for the game generally, I think, and helps people build more, I guess, over the cycle, their club, rather than just thinking about 11 players. So I do think that's good, and I think I've found that myself. Like, I've switched between a couple of different leagues when squad building, rather than, whereas I previously had a core of players, maybe even 7, that just wouldn't change or would be really fixed, and I'd be always looking to build around them. Actually, 3 or 4 of those I'll take out and move other players in, and I think that's actually not a bad thing for the game generally. So I think it's a good thing to point out. But I think people have different views on that. Some people might think, well, that's too much. I don't want to have to think about so many players. That's not how I want to play the game. But I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. Kimpembro, let's move on to you. How have you been feeling about it?
I definitely agree with Japes in the sense that right now the issues with chemistry are way more prevalent than they will be towards the end of the game cycle, because towards the end of the game cycle last year, none of the players needed chem anyway. Like Ronaldo was like 99 in most of his stats, that sort of stuff. So chemistry back then didn't matter. But right now, I think it really matters. For instance, if we look at the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, right? I would love to put a finisher chemistry style on him, get the plus 15 finish in, and pop him in my team. So he needs the 3 chem. It is near on impossible to get this guy on chem, because there's no Surinamese managers. Obviously, that's his nationality. I don't know how to say it. There's only like 5 gold players from Union Berlin. So for that, to get him on 3 chemistry, I need 8 points in Bundesliga. So including him, that's 7 Bundesliga players just to get him on the 3 chemistry points I'd need to be able to give him the plus 15 finishing. Whereas back in the day, you'd put him in like a 4-5-1, you'd put maybe a Bundesliga hero next to him to strong link, and you'd be sorted, or 2 Bundesliga players. So right now, I'm not a huge fan of the chemistry system, on how restrictive it is in regards to off leagues, off nations. I mean, it's actually far more punishing this year than last year, because you was able to manipulate formations in order to get people on certain chemistry. I actually think the dynamic duos, I think they dropped the ball on the first 2 personally. I know that Josh said he likes them. I like the idea of them, but what they did was they released them, same club, different nations. Well, that doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
So with literally the one they released with 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘀𝘁 and 𝘭𝑪h, it's perfect, because what happens is you put both of those in, you have 2 chemistry points straight away for same club, same nation, 1 manager, they're on full chem, which I think's incredible, because at the moment, I feel so pinned in to certain leagues or nations and stuff. I think this is the first time I've run a near full 1 league squad, just because getting chemistry has been a bit of a nightmare. And further down the line, I say it won't matter as much further down the line, but right now, I do actually think chemistry styles are still pretty important. And that plus 15 shooting on my striker is pretty important. So, I mean, there's lots of positives. I mean, not having negative chem, I think is great. You can play I think I put I put Neymar in on 0 chem once, and but it doesn't matter. You're not losing anything. But I just think there is positives and there are negatives, and it's about kind of balancing them. And I think a bit further down the line, it won't be as important. But right now, certain things, for instance, that 𝗵𝘀𝘀 was a prime example for me of why actually this chemistry system is a little bit of an issue. if they made it so that there was a manager for every nation, you stand a bit more of a chance, because at the moment, having to play 7 additional players from the Bundesliga just to get Becker on full chem seems just a bit nonsense, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the other thing just to say is, from what I understand, obviously they can always make the system more lenient and more flexible, but they couldn't really go the other way. So the starting point for them was probably always going to be a bit more conservative, a bit less generous than they could potentially make it in the future if they were to change it. And the other thing is, of course, like we saw with FUT Heroes at the end of last cycle, and those, what are they, premium SBC versions of players?
The premium footies as well, wasn't it?
Which give more chem. That's even easier now, right? They can just release a card and say, right, this one gives an extra player of chem to their league, right? It's so easy for them to do that now. So I think that can probably help as well as the improved stats on players as we move forward. But the big miss for me is, I think, as we've been pointing out, is like, if I want to try a player, I'm just much less inclined, because that player, I'm probably not going to be able to get them on 3 chem unless they happen to already fit into my team very nicely, which is really unlikely. And I'm ending up changing almost my whole team to try a player on full chem. And I'm always intrigued to see what a player's like on full chem, because that is kind of what you aim for. It's easy enough to do it maybe on 1 or 2, and that is in itself positive. The fact that you can easily use a player on 1 or 2 chem and use them without any chem and they'll be effective. But for those of us who want to try a player on full chem, which is what you aim for when you get a player, it isn't ideal. We'll talk a bit more about this after the break, actually, a bit of a late break, as well as other content we've got in FUT at the moment, just after this. Something that you may not be aware of as a more recent listener, or even a listener for the last year or 2, is that there was a point in time where the FUT Weekly podcast wasn't actually able to run weekly. I was getting busy with other things and couldn't focus the time on the podcast. But then someone suggested starting the Patreon. Fast forward a few years, and now the FUT Weekly podcast is weekly. Not only that, it's actually twice weekly, 1 podcast every week for supporters, which is great. Nice to give something back. And if you would like the extra podcast every week and would like to support the podcast, keep it weekly, then there's no better time to do so, because we're coming towards the end of a window where you can enter a 24,000 FIFA point giveaway over on the Patreon. So if you're interested, it's just £3 a month and you get double the podcast content, including this week's gameplay episode focused on how to play with a midfield 3, things like that. You can find that and enter the giveaway by following the link in the description or just searching Support FUT Weekly. Thank you very much if you do consider it, and thank you to those supporters for keeping the pod going. Let's jump back into the pod. Right, let's get back into part 2, and I'll start with 2 listener comments, maybe just summarize them. We've talked a lot about it already, but I think they capture the 2 sides of the argument to some extent. Alex here saying that he feels that it is not ideal because putting in 1 player throws off your entire chem. And he also says it takes a lot to reconfigure your team to correct that to some extent, and sometimes it's impossible. He mentions 𝘱𝘃𝗃 line that this is far from a frictionless experience. And he's saying that's probably the reason why I see a lot of teams that are all 1 league, 85%, he reckons. In his view, EA really missed with the change, whereas Neil here saying that essentially he's really pleased about the increased realism from not being able to convert like 𝘵𝘆𝑚bappé to CDM, for example, and didn't really get hybrids or get why people were so into them. And also feels that people's need for full chem is basically because people almost take the game a bit too seriously and want to compete, and that, I guess, will help them do so. I totally get the point in terms of the realism element. I think that's really good, and I appreciate adding in players just completely on the hoof from other leagues, etc., without any chem. It works now, and that's nice. And it will be better as we move forward in the game and players get better. But I think the flip side that you have to bear in mind is that squad building has been something, despite maybe it looks like there are certain metas like the 4-5-1, is something that has been a kind of valuable skill, which has enhanced people's ability to play the game by building effective squads with the boosts. And if that becomes so difficult that people just stick to like 1 league with a couple of players sprinkled in, it doesn't feel like that element of the game, which has been such a core part of it, has been retained. I don't think we're at the stage where we can say, yes, this is definitely not what it was in terms of being able to be creative and build good squads and take advantage of chemistry in a skilled way. I don't think we're at that point, really, because people are still building. There's still lots more players coming into the game, and it will get easier. But at the moment, it does feel like there are tweaks needed. But there are quite a few advantages to the current system, definitely.
Oh, we didn't even talk about, though, like how easy it is to get players in now from, if you're trying to get the same team boost. Like I have Musiala and Neuer in my squad, and there's no direct links. It's like, okay, you have 2 Bayern players, and away you go.
Yeah,
that's very
positive. Yeah, huge.
And I think that's the dichotomy, isn't it? You've got the fact that now you can have 2 players from the same club and they don't need to be anywhere near each other on the pitch and still give you chemistry, which makes more sense than, 2 French players that have never played in the national team, but because they are next to each other in a 4-5-1, both get 7 chemistry. It makes less sense. But when you get a player like 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘐, who I feel like is only as good as he is and as cheap as he is, because they know it's very difficult to get him on any kind of solid chemistry, that's where there is a fall down. I feel like one of the things we've not spoken about is SBCs, because I think it's been a massive boost to not need chemistry in SBCs. And I do feel like that has happened because of the new chemistry system. But they could have done it in the old system. In fact, they did do it towards the end of last year, almost to prepare us for what they would be like this year. And so that's not really a boost of the new system in my eyes, because it could have happened before.
Yeah, that's their choice, really, from a content
perspective. That's also assuming, by the way, that it's going to be like this for the foreseeable. Just because we don't have any chem requirements now doesn't mean it's not going to be introduced in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think the position change factor, probably the biggest in terms of why we don't have chemistry on these high-rated SBCs, because you'd end up using so many position change consumables. It changed the price of the SBC quite a bit, and you can see they're trying to supply them through the SBC, but they still remain relatively high in price. So I don't know. We'll have to see how things pan out. Maybe we do end up getting chemistry in those high-rated SBCs if there is a greater supply of those. It would be a bit of a shame, though. Let's move on to some SBCs, actually, because we have had plenty of player content that we have not yet got to on this podcast. We've not really covered many players at all, actually, apart from pound for pound ones. So the first one I was going to bring up is the 𝗵𝗀𝘀𝘁. It's a great test of lengthy and acceleration types, because you've got the one that can't be lengthy at all, but then one which is pretty much lengthy with anything. But that lengthy version, the only one that can be lengthy, is awful in terms of his dribbling stats, particularly. 71 reactions, 73 ball control, 75 composure, 76 dribblings, basically, mid to low 70s in all the dribbling stats. Do you think they were like, how many people are silly enough to just want lengthy? I don't know. Does anyone disagree that was such a clear choice if you were going to do him? I guess the weak foot, maybe if people prefer weak foot over skill moves, that version did have the 4-star weak foot, 3-star skills, but yeah, a bit of a no-brainer for me. But any other views welcome.
I think the non-lengthy version is so clear that I think you'd be crazy just to pick the lengthy version, just because, I am a huge fan of cards that start lengthy, though, if that makes sense, because you don't have to sacrifice predominantly people choose Architect, obviously, because it gives the most strength. But I mean, in general, I like pre-lengthy cards, and then you can be a lot more flexible with the chemistry styles. But yeah, that 𝗵𝗀𝘀𝘁 SBC it was a bit of a strange one, really.
You're like a shower, not a grower. That's what you're saying.
If you're lengthy already, then fine, I'm happy.
People are definitely too concerned about having lengthy when controlled is still very effective in behind. Son with a hunter, he's controlled, he gets in behind so effectively. I think he tends to beat players who are the same pace but lengthy quite frequently, and will definitely beat players who are slower than him who are lengthy. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. And James, we were saying this on the last podcast.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
One player who certainly isn't lengthy is that new 𝘵𝘀𝘀𝘁 SBC, or not super new now, I guess. Only 35k for him, and apart from maybe lowish reactions, he looks pretty good. Jason, had you used him? I think you might have done. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. I've used him. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with him, actually. He makes, generally in most FIFAs, he makes FIFA pretty fun for me, because that's small, agile, 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦. He's so responsive. So yeah, no, he's a lot of fun. He was actually one I was going to pick, but last time I was on the pod, I picked 𝘵𝘂𝘰 for my pound for pounds, so I didn't want to pick him again.
Nice. And I think the other player, Dodo, is an interesting one. His passing is so bad.
It's already got Dest.
Yeah, there's already Dest, isn't there? And he's up to an 81 now.
That's why Dodo just felt really awkward to me.
Another player like that is 𝘵𝘵𝘀𝘀, who has some Rulebreakers cards just have like dire stats in a particular category. Like we're talking about with 𝘵𝘀. 𝘵𝘵𝘀𝘀 has, I think it's like, again, low 70s on all the dribbling stats, despite looking pretty good elsewhere. There's just not much you can do to boost reactions and composure, right? Especially on a defensive player without wasting boosts. So I think he's someone that, again, might look all right, but probably isn't that good, and similar with Dodo. And then the other player is the player of the month, Messi. Is anyone interested for 800k at this stage in the cycle? Is it actually only the cam position, I believe, which is a bit of a shame, but
I'm gonna just throw this out there. I've seen people do him. I don't know the packs that are with him, but like for me, it feels crazy that we don't think Messi gets an inform.
Right, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Anytime soon to go up to the exact same rating, and that card's gonna be like 500k maybe tradable.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people saying they could grind for that Messi, and I don't know about you, I'm finding it way more difficult this year to get fodder for SBCs, especially, we're still probably 2 weeks out from League SBCs at this point, and even my packs from Div Rivals, it doesn't seem like there's enough opportunity for me to pack fodder to be able to grind in inverted commas towards this Messi, and at 3 times the price of his base card that is literally just one stat lower. It really, I'm with Japes. I don't know if this one makes sense. If you're desperate for a Messi and running first owner or like the dynamic image,
that's cool.
Then go for it. But it wouldn't be something I would be spending an awful lot of coins on.
Just quickly, completely off topic, by the way. You're talking about you can't boost, there's people's composure. That's I think that's one of the only stats in the game you can't actually boost with a chemistry style. Like composure is just a set.
Yeah, exactly. Apart from stamina, I guess. But
yeah. Going back to Messi, so I've obviously done him, standard. Messi is one of those players that when you have him in your team and you use him, he's amazing. Like he does everything. He's actually a lot of fun.
He's awesome.
But without trying to like, if I was going to advise someone, should they spend 750k on him? Definitely not. Just get the tradable one. There won't be much difference. But I mean, actually the card itself is phenomenal.
I wanted to just quickly, as we're talking about players, I'm sure someone or plenty of listeners at home will be thinking it, but Japes, there's a 𝘵𝘀𝘀 in form, which is nice. I'm guessing he probably doesn't fit your team, but still nice to see.
I've got some Serie A boys in.
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah. It's only a +1 though, I guess, unlike last year where it was the golden 84 to 86 upgrade, wasn't it?
Yeah, he got the 𝘵𝘂𝘰 upgrade, but this year he just got the base stats upgrade, right?
Yeah.
It just said, we'll just give you that 86.
Yeah.
My midfield is like a little clogged at the moment, just for what we've been talking about chemistry wise. Trying to get Bundesliga chem for some Bayern boys. And I like using Musiala, and then I have Benacer in the midfield as well. So between those two,
they're both very, very good.
Yeah, not the room that we're, I guess it's crowded. That Blanc card really is causing problems.
Causing chemistry problems or problems for your opponent.
Yeah, I just don't know what to do with it. I would say I like him. I don't love him. Like there are games that he certainly feels like pretty dominant, but oftentimes I just feel like the card's like fine, but I'm like, I should use this card, Like, I'm not going to end up using him for that long, I would imagine. So I might as well, make hay while the sun shines would be an American expression. I guess I don't know if they say that in Europe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay, great.
Well, actually, it'd be worth us talking about whether people should make hay while the sun shines. And by the sun shining, I mean this max 87 hero SBC that's going to come. Whether, we don't know the price at the time of recording, but whether it's going to be worth completing if, let's say, that it is about the same price or maybe even cheaper than the Icon SBC last week, which a lot of people felt was decent value. So, yeah, Josh, what are your thoughts on that? Should people be doing it if they haven't done it already, of course?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I could see a very similar price. I actually thought that for EA, and especially around icons. I thought the SBC last week was really well priced. It was right in that most of the players were around that 100k mark that the SBC ended up coming in at, with the kind of quite a lot of opportunity to get a 200k player and the opportunity to get Ruud van Nistelrooy. But I think with this one, it's going to be a kind of similar price. I think it will make it less worth it because there are so much more option on the lower end that you're likely to get. But with the extra chemistry that the heroes get, it could, if you get a 𝘭𝑪, for example, another cam, although he can be moved to right mid, it could really help if you're running a Bundesliga setup like Japes is, just to get those extra 2 league chem points. It might allow for a little bit more team creativity.
Yeah, certainly hoping myself that it'll help a bit more than the icon one, chemistry-wise. But what about you, Jason, Kimpembro? Any particular thoughts on whether people should do it if it's around the same price as the icon one, maybe a bit cheaper?
What I said about the icon SBC last week is I don't think it's good value because of how many unusable icons there are. But I didn't think it was bad value. So I thought it was worth a crack, really. What I will say, icons this year, a lot of them are way more viable simply just because of the way the game is. The meta of the game, like in previous years, was you had to have a certain body type, height, dribbling ability, that sort of stuff. And if you didn't fit inside that meta, you was unusable. But this year, there's a lot more usable cards. You see a lot of people running cards that you wouldn't usually use. So I mean, it did make it a pretty good SBC. I think this hero, I think it might be a bit more expensive than last week's, because I agree that the low end of the heroes, you've got like, I don't know, about 5 heroes or 4 heroes, all like less than 40k. But the pool is smaller, and I'd say about half of the heroes are pretty usable. Whereas I don't think the ratio was quite that good for icons, and the icons don't. Obviously, the icon chemistry is a bit of a pain, So I think we might see it similar or a little bit more. I don't see it being any cheaper. Obviously, everyone's going to be hunting for 𝘭𝑪𝘬𝘀𝘀. And then, anything, the other side of that, you've got 𝘭𝑪𝘬𝘀𝘀, 𝘀𝑪, that sort of stuff. But I mean, I'll definitely do it. You've got to take a shot, right? I think 𝘭𝑪𝘬𝘀𝘀 is like 1.2 million, you got to roll the dice. And that's what a lot of people play the game for, don't they? The little casino packs gives you that that endorphin rush. Yeah. So, but I think it will be a bit more. Not much more, but I think it'll be a bit more.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, though, with the icon SBC was like a no-brainer. It was like, at this point in the game, almost any of these icons are like, quote unquote, like usable in some way, shape, or form. Like the majority of them, for sure. So like, why not roll the dice and see what happens? And I think the hero one's going to be probably pretty similar for me. And also, if you're running a Premier League team, like I feel like the number of Premier League heroes is quite high.
Yeah, it's mad. I would say as well, we have got to keep in mind that we are now 3 and a bit weeks away from the World Cup, when we're going to get the World Cup heroes. And if you pre-ordered the game, you're going to get a World Cup version of these heroes. Now, they might have different leagues, and I don't think everyone is getting a World Cup version. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not. I don't think they are. So there is that to bear in mind, which could affect the price. But Jason brings up a great point, that there's 12 players that are 150k or higher and 13 that are 100k or lower, and nobody in between. So I would suggest probably we will see it in the 150 plus range price wise, but they may price it low as a compensation for the hero pack, or as a kind of bringing the price down as we lead into the World Cup. Be interesting to see where they put it.
I was going to say, if it's any more than 25k, then it's bad value, really, isn't it? So, I mean, maybe there is some argument that they should be a bit more generous, considering the number of people who got a free 25k tradable hero. But we'll have to see. It'll be interesting to see how this next couple of weeks pans out in the build up to the World Cup. I think there's already rumors of what promo we're going to be getting on Friday, which seems like one that a lot of people are going to like, and is going to add more chemistry options, which is nice. And I feel like it's a theme that
which promo's that, Ben?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll say it, and then
you can't just like tease it.
You can close your ears if you don't want spoilers, right? But it is going to be out of position, so there'll be position changes and things. That's the rumor at the moment. Yeah. But also, I think they're doing it so early because they'll be doing this multiple times during the cycle, because it's just such an attractive proposition. with the way chemistry works, I could definitely see it coming back in the future. I think we should probably wrap up there though, because we're going to go off and do the gameplay pod. But yeah, thank you very much to our guests here. We'll start with Kimpembro, aka Jason. It's been great to have you back on for the first time in FIFA 23.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I always enjoy doing this. So yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, hopefully I'll be back soon.
Yeah, definitely. And for those who don't know, where can people catch you on Twitter, etc.?
Oh yeah, I'm Kimpembro on all socials. I say it all the time. It's pretty unique, so I didn't struggle to get Kimpembro across every social. So yeah, you can find me on all socials: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, that sort of stuff.
Just don't know why it wasn't Kimpembro.
Yeah, very English. Very English.
And we've also had Josh, aka SpreadsheetFIFA. So thank you very much again for coming on.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. As I told you in private messages, it stops me from talking FIFA to the missus, so it's a net positive.
That sounds quite a good podcast. Maybe do some special episodes. And we've also had 𝘵𝘂𝑝𝑠 on this podcast, of course. Thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers, Ben. Happy to be back. I enjoyed talking content this week, hoping for some big content weeks to come.
That wraps up the pod, and as I'm recording this in the future, I can jump in and say that the Hero SBC obviously did come as we expected, and everything there was still relevant because it was actually even cheaper than the expected price, I would say. And that meant, it was well worth the gamble. I even did it on the Road to Glory and managed to get 𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘀𝘀, which was actually very good. He's pretty usable. I used him in draft in the past and he was effective. So looking forward to using him again. So yeah, send some pics. See who you got over on Twitter @FUTWeeklyPod. And of course, as always, if you've listened to this and enjoyed it, if you're listening for the first time, do subscribe. You can do so via all the podcast platforms. And of course, if you would like to enter that 24,000 FIFA point giveaway, support the pod, keep it going, just £3 a month, and you get bonus podcasts every week, including this week's gameplay podcast, then it is a great time to do so because of that 24,000 FIFA point giveaway, which it isn't too long until it ends. So head over to bit.ly/23 points or just search support for weekly or follow the link in the description. Thank you very much, as always, to all the supporters keeping the podcast going and those icon patrons. Dave B, Hugh J, Coach Vass, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, Elliot M, Dan W, @𝘵𝑚𝑎𝑡𝑜RTOISE, Roger D, Jake G, Springford, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add, though. FIFA's a bit like life, really. It has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.